Thank you everybody for coming tonight. I'd like to welcome to the very second, I was about to say first, the very second artist panel lecture series by Start to Arta, which is a curatorial platform started by myself, my good friend Juan in the back, Oksana, and Sabrina, who is unfortunately sequestered in Italy and they won't let her leave. For obvious reasons. Meaning COVID. So I would like to introduce, before I get started on the topic and start the discussion, I'd like to take a second to introduce our panelists tonight. So I'm going to begin with Lily Jackson in the pink on the left. Lily is a New York City-based artist. Her work is inspired by nature and the environment. Lily makes sustainable work, frequently utilizing wood, clay, and mycelium. Is that right? Mycelium?
Structures of mushrooms.
Right, which is another fancy word for mushrooms. All right. Respectful of the artisan traditions she has inherited, she innovates within them, turning methods and materials to new uses. With a bachelor degree in global environmental policy and a master's of industrial design, she works in the area in between function and use, with an eye to nature, space, and context. Her fundamental principle is make the world a better place. Thank you for joining us, Lil. Charlotte Le Pelletier is a French national living in New York City. Her gallery, QCM, is one of the first contemporary art galleries to open a space in alternative neighborhood of Bushwick in Brooklyn. This curatorial project was initiated by Charlotte, who takes a gamble breaking free from conventional gallery formats by investing in unusual private or institutional venues in order to promote contemporary art transversely and in all its forms. QCM project also offers artists and artist residency program and promotes a contemporary art fund. Thank you, Charlotte, for joining us. Juan, in the striped shirt and the fashionable hat. Juan Puentes is a curator and gallery owner here in New York City. Puntes. Thank you. Juan Puntes is a curator and gallery owner in New York City. He founded White Box as the original Chelsea non-profit alternative space in 1998, built a highly reputable venue known for its thought-provoking exhibitions with cutting-edge contemporary artists vis-a-vis little-known, avant-garde, historical, influential producers. While focusing on site-specific work, performance, and video projects, White Box is also offering a wide array of programming, including readings, lectures, and panel discussions. Outside White Box, Mr. Puntes has contributed to a number of international curatorial projects. In 2009, he curated a survey of international video art at the Perm Museum of Contemporary Art. Yeah?
Russia.
In Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to get that right. Of late, Juan relocated to Harlem with White Box Harlem. Here he is creating a series of programs and engaging community with emphasis on sustainability and the environment, as well as continuing its socio-political projects to better engage the variegated and culturally underserved communities, youth in particular. Thank you, Juan, for joining us. And last but not least, Scotto Mickelbus. Is that right? Scotto was born in Minneapolis. Apples. He studied art and humanities at the University of Minnesota and obtained degrees in studio arts, visual communications, and theater set design from Augsburg College. Myklebust has long been a versatile and pioneering force in multimedia art. His practice encompasses painting, drawing, sculpture, sound, video, and performance. He practices art in New York City. With Public Art Squad in 2004, Myklebust reached beyond the world of studios, museums, and galleries, introducing performance art into public space. In 2011, Scotto created and published Revolt magazine, a print tabloid and online art commentary publication with international distribution. He has become an artist advocate and activist for New York City's West Chelsea artist community and the arts, helping artists develop and grow as independent artists. Scotto recent projects include a new online publication, Art 511 magazine. Welcome, Scott. Thank you. So, as a way of introduction to the topic of discussion tonight, I'm going to read a question which I believe the panel has already read, but some of you may not know it, so I'm going to introduce it again. The question for thought and debate tonight is as follows. We are in the middle of a generational change to everything we know.
Yes.
The effect of the pandemic on our way of life, not only locally, but globally as well, is and will continue to be enormous. Contemplating the emergence from this condition with an eye towards the arts and culture has value, and it is why we're here tonight. How might artistic and cultural change look within these shifts? History is ripe with cultural and artistic milestones emerging from cataclysmic events. Many are from violent conflicts, but not all. Can we pull from any historical precedents to guide us in contemplating what our future might look like, or has our increasingly virtual lives broken unknown barriers? So it's sort of a mouthful, there's a lot to contemplate, but it really comes down to one thing. We're in the middle of a historical change, a big one. And how is that going to reflect on art and culture today and in the future? And maybe we can sort of start the discussion off. Charlotte, would you like to talk about that?
Sure. I'm really happy to be here tonight, and I really haven't prepared anything. I came with a very open mind. I think it's a critical change, a general change for everyone, not just for the art and culture, obviously. And I work myself with very traditional art, mostly painting and sculptures. We are also specialized in self-taught artists or outsider artists, and sometimes people that live a bit off the grid or outside of society. So these people do not have necessarily access or desire to do high tech that much. I mean, I know that sounds very binary, but it's true. It's true. And what you do when you show art in a very traditional way, when people have this physical connection, how can you substitute the interaction that you have with the artist and the gallery itself, and how do we adjust nowadays? So the only thing I have is questions. I don't have any answers. I'm very open to finding solutions, and there are really interesting people tonight. I met Giovanna, who's in charge who's developing a platform to do online exhibitions, and it's very interesting because we're going to have to use these tools in the future. So I just allow myself to read some of the open questions regarding art in general. I'm just going to go through them because I think they're interesting and they're going to very generally interesting. So, first question, that's a challenge. How can we prevent certain population from being discriminated or marginalized from artificial intelligence? When there's not so much access to technology, when people have the right tools. How can we coexist with machines that lack human values and empathy? How can we use these tools? How can we continue to work remotely? What happens when a program can rewrite its own code, and maybe diverse from the intention of its creator, and so on and so on? What are the geopolitical issues that artificial intelligence can carry? And what is an artificial intelligence artwork, generally speaking? Like what is it? Is it digital art? Is it a programmer sending a message? Who's the receiver? So I think all these questions are very generalistic. And the idea is to find a transition between the physical and the digital world in the first step, and then see how we can move on. From my perspective, we do 90% of the business in the art fairs or in the opening exhibition days. So it's a real issue because of the traveling restrictions and all that. We're going to have to show some things online. We're going to have to use some of the artificial intelligence to render this physical experience. And I don't know how an online exhibition, just simply speaking, can really help, or can be, simply that, just, I'm on the stage of, we are just preparing our first online exhibition ever. I've never done that in my entire life. I don't know how to work in this way, so it's very interesting.
It's not only interesting, but it's a little frightening, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think for dealers and artists themselves, I think it's important to think about who is your audience and how are they looking at your work. And, January, that was one frame of mind, and today it's another. And however that's going to end up shaking out is going to be very interesting to watch and or be a part of. Thank you, Charlie.
I have a comment in regards to what,
Please.
your words just, got my mind rolling, and I asked this question. I was just sitting here like, will it matter? Meaning, will those words on the wall, that display over there, have any meaning now or in the future when you talk about buying online, buying a work of art to hang on your wall? Because, or in your office, which really, the idea of the state of an office doesn't really comply anymore. How many of you here work at home? I mean, that's kind of the question. And maybe you want to decorate your house, but I took a ride today in an Uber down Fifth Avenue, what was that? Park Avenue, where all these big office buildings, and I was going by and seeing all these huge paintings, and there were a lot of these huge, massive things. And a person with me said, "Well, this is all mode. Doesn't mean anything." And you're talking about the digital world, and you're talking about the AI and the physical world today is changing so much as we go. The physical world today is changing so much of what we used to know. And I'm in my studio making objects, you know, and does that matter anymore as an artist? It's kind of, that kind of came to my mind here. Will that matter anymore? Are we going into a futuristic, kind of like Hollywood moment where, there's a movie I'm thinking of, Keanu Reeves, when he was digitized and, you know, was carrying all his information from one spot to the other. No, I can't remember. Not The Matrix, and way before that, he was very young, but it's, you know, and that was about how much hard drive stuff you could carry in your head and transport it. It was good, bad. But it was very futuristic in a way. And, you know, I was like, is that where we're going to end up in a point? And I'm just thinking about, you know, the objects that we all possess and crave and buy and want to sell. What's the meaning of that, you know, in this day and age? It's just kind of a question.
Nice to see that. Well, just because you find it in the Matrix. No, but the idea is that we are, before COVID, we were living in an increasingly online world and an increasingly VR world. Well, I mean, art itself, like lots of VR art, let alone now we're trying to digitalize galleries and art, you know, like expos, right? So you can walk through Art Basel now, like, you know, walk through it or something. But in the Matrix, there's this world that we think we live in, right? And that's all really fake. And so there's these other people that are living in a real world, and they're actually connecting in real life because they're actually alive. So we can figure out a way to still connect in real life. It just might mean it's outside. Like we can utilize outdoor spaces for art, or we can also, I mean, another thing that was an issue before COVID even, is that many cities. Okay, so we have a problem with space and access to physical places, right? As in, it's very expensive to make art or show art, right? So studio space is very expensive and real estate is very expensive,
Absolutely.
right? So we have, I mean, we've always had, and we still have, increasingly, empty spaces that landlords are sitting on, and they get actually money to not rent it out. So we should finally figure that out and say, hey, instead of getting a tax credit for claiming hardship for not renting out your giant warehouse, you will now be penalized. And then we'll have giant spaces where we can still have socially distant art making. We can still communicate and collaborate and connect in real space if we just make the cities do that. We just, also the cities will make more money, by the way. They still actually make money on taxes instead of giving out tax credits.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I don't know if you own a space, but we had to shut down because being there physically, having anyone paying for the rent, it just doesn't work. I mean, you might end up selling one painting over 6 months, and it's just opening costs you money. So obviously we have to go online and go in the matrix. The question is, how do you link the physical world to the digital one? And the real question is artificial intelligence a threat, or is it empowering the traditional art? You know, it's also the way, it depends how we use it. But you're totally right. The transition is always has already started. That's before COVID. So we're going there anyways.
But we can fight that, and we should fight that.
I don't know if we should fight or embrace it.
I've actually been working on a tax policy revision, actually, for like 5 years. My undergrad was in poli-sci. If anyone wants to talk about that, a whole other non-art related thing, but it's very based on the art space. When have we had like amazing things happen? It's when artists and musicians and writers and everything could afford to live in a place, and then they made cool things.
Then the 70s.
Well, I mean, even the 90s, it means Like, basically,
All right, we're going to talk about real estate. Wow, that's another discussion we should have.
Yeah, and maybe we could.
Art is the real art in the fake state, or the state of the art in the time. Go ahead. Anyhow, I will go on to the digital thing. But first of all, I'm going to introduce myself properly. Juan Puntes, Spanish born, drafty Baker in the Franco's army. I arrived here in '73. Vietnam is still kicking ass. So I waited 7 years until I'm out of military age. And it's a paradox because Eisenhower, JFK, and Nixon backed up my generalism of Franco, which is becoming the closest thing to generalism of Trump in many ways. The changes that I see being pushed, almost effective, etc., are very much what I grew up with. You can bring she here too, and we could have sex, alcohol, some drugs. With tourists and rock and roll. I love it. I was a DJ in an American town called Zaragoza. Francisco de Goya and Luis Buñuel were born, and we had 14,000 American troops. That brought me here as a DJ in a drafting maker. Right? Nothing to do with art. I despise art because my family was from the art world. So anyhow, after being an artist, this and that, linked to many generations. Actually, the presidents were my teachers, Fidel Zubas, Philip Padilla, Esteban Vicente. So I have a very good history of very painting, etc. But one good day, 23 years ago, I decided to open a not-for-profit art space in Nassim, Chelsea, with 7 galleries. And 10 years later, there will be 400, which would mark my departure, breaking out a very good lease to go to the Lower East Side. And there I will spend 10 more years. Only while we present the historical figures, as our moderator said, and what's going on all around New York, right? Miniature PS1 sort of thing. But we work with the women's prison in Chelsea. We work with the Tim Rollins Syndicates of Survival. And we decided to concentrate not on the marketplace, but on what art as a cultural tool has to do with audiences in New York. Most of the audiences are always fed high-end art, right, in the marketplace, which is natural. Since the Medicis, this is what we have, and we continue buying objects, selling objects, and now it's going to come on to the new object code, which is online, digital. Today I will put a bad, sad note with the economy collapsing as it did in 2008-2009. Art in general used to be a remarkable non-profit. Our space has shut down for good. In 2008-2009, 80 non-profits shut down. We are around the corner from doing that. We don't succeed with the new December benefit action. We will be honoring Tim Rollins and the Kids of Survival, a white man from Maine, white trash, he said to me, went to the South Bronx in the 70s and rescued a whole generation, making them read and make 4 books, remarkable books, then make paintings. Soho was his home base, and out of that, in rest in peace right now. He influenced what I do today. In terms of the switch to the online, in January, February, we did the first show, trapped in Wuhan. We're going to market. Did the first video in the world, made in January in Wuhan, and it's like every magnificent artist. Since we have grants, we did actually through Chinese artists in New York in the 80s, Ai Weiwei, Shooting, etc. Mexicans in New York, from Orozco to Orozco. We had to go online because we had grants. And to me, it was a very difficult step, but I enjoyed it. And I'm going to finish by saying, I began to curate a series of Zooms, which I will pay attention to, and Facebook. So we had 12,000 people, direct views of this together.
That's a big exposure.
Yeah, and now we have, this, we have good, strong, yeah, we have something happening. Good Trouble, homage to John Lewis. This is what we have coming up on the 25th of October, with performances on November 3rd. Traditionally, Martha Rosler, the most important feminist radical artist, with Semiotics of the Kitchen, etc., comes for 4 years to VJ the results at the end of the night until 12 a.m. 4 years ago was fatigued. She almost cried. She left in shadows. And 4 years earlier, she was very happy with Obama. And now she's going to come in VJ. So you're all welcome if you RSVP to wineboxonline.org. So anyhow, the transferring into Zoom, etc. has been quite interesting. And the object versus the idea and the image and so forth. Being non-profit, I also collaborate with galleries, with curators, with artists, because we exhibit art and performances and so forth. So when you're absent of participating in the same world, yeah, I have the freedom, so to say, that I don't have to depend on the market. So I can put social, political, instigated art that in other places you could not sell, right? So we mix it up. But I think the online is interesting. It is fatiguing, and a lot of people sick and tired 7 months later. I hear that from a lot of our audience. But we will kick ass again, and good luck. I have many friends who are closing the galleries, they put online, and they have to reinvent themselves and seduce the curator, the collectors.
Thank you, Juan. I'm going to give it to you next, Scotto. What I picked up on both Charlotte and Juan were talking about is that, part of the answer potentially is technology, and so how is that going to drive us, or will it at all?
Actually segue into something about that. Well, people here in New York may have experienced and noticed about the protest and Black Lives Movement and all of this dissension that's been going on. And there was this neighborhood that I frequent on a daily basis called Soho. And you all, I'm sure, have heard of it. It used to be the center of the art world in the, starting in the 70s. And, it was the only place. And I just want to kind of share my experience during the peak of the pandemic and the protests all happening at once. And a phenomenal thing kind of happened, and you might have heard about it or been down there. There are all these storefronts. And, one day I went down there and Louis Vuitton and a couple other ones were putting plywood on the front of the things, and I was like, why does that happen? And then I kind of noticed a lot of the high-end shops, and this is on Green Street, all the merchandise was gone out of the windows, but all the fixtures were there. And I started, this is very early on, we're talking about early March, and I was like, what do they know that I don't know? Because I frequent that neighborhood on a daily basis. And then I started to see more plywood go up on the high-end stores, more and more. And then, very short time after that, one day, I came, and there's this store in the corner of Green and Prince. I think it's called Karen Scott or something. It was all, her store colors were yellow. That was her branding color. And they had put plywood over all in big glass and painted all yellow. And I came in the morning, and there was a stencil, the first artwork related to the pandemic I've ever seen anywhere in New York City. There may be, but this is my experience. There was a stencil of a face with a mask, and it said "mask up." It was about this big.
You got your mask the wrong way, though.
Wow.
You got your mask the wrong way.
I'm masked up. But anyway, so when and then the next day, all of a sudden there were these
big photographs of obviously healthcare workers that have masks on, protesters. And, you know, on and on, more artwork started to fill the boarded up stores. And on a Saturday, I came there, on Sunday, I'm sorry, I came there, and there were about 100 stores all painted up. Someone came in the night and decorated all these things with messages of love, of protest, of gender, of sex, of, you know, of Trump politics, and all hand painted, you know, stencils, spray paint, and it populated, and it was amazing. And I was like, really, this is kind of what we're talking about. The artist had came and started to react and use this whole neighborhood and the plywood as their canvases, and it was amazing.
Anyone wonder what that plywood's gonna be worth just a little bit further down the road?
There's actually an artist designer who's making furniture out of that plywood named Christopher All or something, whatever.
There was an enterprising crew
Yes.
that got paid by the store owners to remove the plywood with paintings.
Yes.
That's a score.
Interesting enough, to just go on the story, about a week later I came, and a friend of mine who's a videographer, we decided, let's go to Soho and interview and capture this, you know, document. Which was very exciting. We got there, and there were over 100 artists. This is a Saturday morning. There were 100 artists. I know for a fact that number. Mostly interesting enough, the gender was a lot of female artists. And they were all grabbing a plywood window and making these messages on it, and the work was incredible, all styles.
How do you know they were all females?
Pardon?
How do you know they were all females?
He was there.
They appeared to be females. That's,
Well, I think they were. I mean, they looked like it. At any rate, and that was a coordinated effort by a specific person that, you know, put a word out online to come and makes a protest art and talk about what's going on in the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, and it, you know, it kind of snowballed. In the end, there was I think over 1,000 works of art. A lot of what you said in terms of people were coming, you know, and is that value what the value is. But I'm kind of, you know, that's an illustration of what artistic, it brought the artists out, it brought people that weren't artists into an area to express themselves about the political and the social things that are going on.
It sounds like
today.
there's some degree of adapting to change and embracing opportunity.
the unembraceable.
And so, you know, I think, you know, that's sort of the things that we're talking about is, you know, how is change going to affect culture and art. And one undeniable fact is that we're in the middle of change, again, as I mentioned. And that's really what we're talking about. You know,
What kind of change are you referring to? No, I'm asking you. Because there's many changes according to.
I don't think there's one kind of change, or I don't think there's anything that's changing that we can specifically, well, any one sort of simple thing that we can point to. I think that the pandemic has birthed this, you know,
New world.
change, potentially new world, but how is the reaction? What I'm more interested in hearing about, or I think is interesting to discuss and listen to, is how is that change going to look, and how do we or artists embrace that change and look to the future?
Okay.
And I think Charlotte had a good comment. You know, one of the things, you know, AI technology, I think, is a big part of that. And I'm not sure how that's going to end up looking or what that's going to be. But I think that, you know, and from my you know, my chair, it seems like that's somehow going to affect what's happening. Charlotte, you want to talk?
Yeah, I'd love to.
So is this green or is this green? Is it
So a mask worn by Picasso
One second, sorry.
would be an art object.
Go ahead.
It would fetch a lot of money at the auction.
I'll bring some questions, thank you for your, to the crowd in a moment.
In 2008, 2009,
Yes.
is exactly when we had the biggest downslide in the economy, correct? Would everybody agree to it? Yes?
One up.
2008, 2009?
We've had so many.
If we go back that far, we have to go back 100 years. And look at what's
Okay, no, deviate. That's the Spanish flu days, so recover from that. Okay. Holland Carter, a very respectable writer for the New York Times, and I think that the one with more historicity in his writing, predicted the good news that on their at that moment economically, artists began to work in collectives. They began to forget about the high market, and all of a sudden there was this kind of feeling, even galleries in Jersey, they were like, wow, you know, showing artworks that normally would not be shown there for sale, but they took that moment as, you know, an inquisitionary moment when, you know, more art made by the same artist that usually normally showing things much more collectible, they become a little bit more radical. But that disappeared as soon as the economy changed.
Art is dead. Long live the art.
Charlotte,
I just have a thought that, you know, when you go back to the modernist period in Paris of art and the type of work that is coveted, not so much today, but was, came out during the period of a tragic war, you know, the First World War. And artists, I think, you know, react and come together to want to talk about societies and reflect upon them. Tragedy is a powerful thing in society, and artists, you know, we're sensitive to those things and like to talk about it. And I think the illustration I was talking about Soho is, you know, huge amount of people came out and created a huge amount of work. And what the value is and where it is and where it goes is one thing, but, you know, I think with the pandemic, you know, the question, the building that I am, a lot of artists have given up, like, I can't stop, move on, go someplace else. I've done this for, it's a question I've done this for 20, 30 years, and is it really worth that time and effort that I've made? So there's a lot of personal.
Is that an economic question?
I think it is here in New York at least. I don't know about otherwise, but here in New York it's totally an economic question in terms of can I afford a $2,000, $1,000, 30, you know, whatever. And you know, and I put so much into it, and now all of a sudden it's all gone in a way. So there's a lot of choices. I know a lot of people in that situation that reevaluate.
Let me throw something, let me throw a ball. Between the two world wars, there was Dada, was the most important
Absolutely.
movement
Right.
that evolved into Rauschenberg, John Rosenberg, etc. They were neo-Dadaists, so early so pretty much almost that moment, and it was right after the Vietnam War, etc.
Well, that's what I'm saying is.
So do you think for you, as a linguist, I'm wondering, but do you think that today this group of artists, tens of thousands living in New York, LA, whatever you may call it, do you think they have the spirit, the gut, the capability, and the willingness to go Dada again?
I think we need to be able to connect, like, and the idea is like, okay, I brought this silly little infographic that I used in my master's degree a pretty long time ago, not that long ago, 5 years ago, that I did not.
You're hired.
Thank you. This is just Hubs for Progress, and it's going from, you know, the Library of Alexandria and the University of Timbuktu to the French Impressionists and the Savoy Hotel and the Bloomsbury Group and the Algonquin Hotel Group, you know, Round Table and, you know, these like. So they're coming together, but you have to somehow come together in either in some space. So it's either going to be online or in person, and there still needs to be a connection, like to make groups of people to become what you were just saying. So as we're
But mental and online is just ways to deliver something. That is not the thing itself. It's just a mechanism to move a resource path, a resource, right? Or a poem or whatever else. So the idea is, what is behind that is what I'm interested in.
connection.
Like Ortega said, back to the essence.
Yes.
Socrates,
Yes.
Ortega said, when the conflict with this and that, you forgot where you are, confusing times of change, go back to the essence. What brings you to make art? Because you pay $50,000 at Columbia or at Yale, or $15,000 at City College, you have the debt and all that, struggle itself. And you put in something. And in those days, they didn't study to become masters of. They took classes, and they actually had a better understanding. When you talk about Austria, when you talk about Switzerland, all these people, Paris, Munich, all these people actually you had in the Bauhaus gave us a very good clue. There's all kinds of artists and writers and designers and that, and the London Times of Arts and Crafts. Yeah, today is. When I went to art school at the lovely museum school in Boston, you had to be a painter, a sculptor, or this. Media was being done, but they didn't teach media, and you could not go and study this and that, right? Even though Hans Breder and Intermedia was created, University of Iowa, I did a fabulous show for that reason. He created it in '68. And the first $10,000, the Robert Wilson came out of that moment. So did Ana Mendieta. So did all of these fabulous people that influenced all new generations now, it was already done. But it was not paid attention to. The great change is not in the optics of online, digital, or not. It's what is the essential thing you have to tell the people. What is art communicating? Because you don't communicate, you're decorating.
So, Charlotte, talk for a second.
Yeah, I hear a lot of, we're talking about the online world, but more than that, what does artificial intelligence really imply? If to stick to the topic, it also means a lot of.
But in what matter of use?
Well, what is artificial intelligence in the process of creating, in the process of organizing an exhibition? Like, are you using coding? Are you using a program? Like, how does...
But what is behind the coding? What's the
So,
coding?
Coding is an AI, it's human.
I think that the big question is, okay, is it frightening because at some point artificial intelligence is going to supplant the human creation or
No.
not? I see it as a world of opportunities as well. And it's a totally unknown world, but it's also a very more democratic way of creating because somehow it gives tools to artists. Artists are always interested in expanding their creativity, I mean most of them. And of course, up to now, real estate is very linked to art because you have a space and you show art and you produce art. But what if you can't pay for your studio this month?
The biggest collectors are real estate models.
And yeah, exactly. And I think it's also a new world of opportunity where there might be less discrimination somehow. I mean, some people might be able to create art pieces in their small bedroom without having a huge studio because they just can't afford it. So it's also interesting in terms of democracy and
But they have to afford a computer and the programs and the education to use those programs. I mean, it's not.
Exactly.
So it's not, I don't know how that's more democratic.
Let me ask you a very.
No, I think it's
very-
everything and the opposite at the same time. That's what I mean.
Would
Because
you-
there's something really frightening for most parts. And at the same time, you might see, it really depends how artificial intelligence is used in my opinion.
Would you find collectors for this real artificial intelligence?
And that's a very good point because I do not have the collectors for this art. So it's just a new transition and what artists are really interested in using these new tools when they work in very traditional arts, it's interesting and I'm very neutral because I'm just open to, conversation and see.
So I have a question for you, Charlotte. So when you're talking about artificial intelligence, to me it's a relationship between the artist, the viewer, and the thing in the middle, right? Which is this sort of broad stroke technology, which I'm calling it. I think there's better ways of describing it, but that's all I got for now. So there's sort of three factors involved, and what's forcing that separation is the fact that we're wearing masks and standing in a room and trying to stay apart from each other and being careful and conscious of our own safety and those around us and the ones we love. So that is dramatically different than it used to be. And what's forcing that is, the condition that we're in. So where does that go? I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think everybody agrees that we're going to come out of this, right? When, how, okay, I don't know.
How many galleries will close by that time?
Well, but again,
How
so
many
what
artists will have moved out
is
of
the
the
wasteland of art and culture going to look like? And I think that's is that the word to use?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wasteland.
Something, Charlotte, can I just speak about, the artificial intelligence and the technology today? I'm from an era when I started my career in art in the late 70s, early 80s. And there was a lot of new technology that was coming out at that time, from, God, you could capture video, and there were LTDs, and there was this thing called computer, and I, as an artist, what do you want, instant understanding of technology. I was in the position to be able to test this thing, this small box that had a little screen, a little keyboard, and a little printer. And the first thing as an artist, and it was brought to me by a good friend of mine's father, I don't know what he did, but he said, check this out and tell me what you think. And first thing as an artist, I said, can I make a drawing with this thing? And it had a little mouse. And I found out it had a program and I could make a drawing. And I could print it out. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is like technology. That product was a product that was launched in 1984 by Apple Computer. And I had the opportunity, just because of the circumstances, I was able to try it out and just tell this guy's father, this is really cool, man. I made 4 drawings out of this thing. Very traditional, very modernist kind of idea, skull, and still life, blah, 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 blah. And I made some abstract things because the technology let me, do stuff like this on a screen and then print it out. And from that day on, I understand that it's just another tool like a paintbrush, or a piece of chalk, or a piece of plaster. It's just another tool in the artist that's technology today, related to the day. And I embrace that and have done many, many things over the course of time using technology and using traditional methods and putting them together, for over 20, 30 years. And, what I'm kind of saying to you, all of those things for an artist is just a way to make it work. though they have a huge influence on what you create and how you create. To answer Juan's question about the Dadaist and what's happening today, for myself, my personal experience when the pandemic happened, and I got quarantined or I cannot go out, I got to stay in my apartment, I decided as an artist to live my life as normal as possible. And what I mean by that is to keep my studio activity. And I decided to do some research, so I went and I found out Picasso, what did he do during the war years? So I got a book and I read about that. And I started to look back at other artists and find out what was their life like in tragedy and chaos, and then look at the work that they produced. It's amazing the things that
Tell
they
them
do.
for divertimento. We need funny examples. Picasso painted several times on the same painting. That he discovered for X-rays,
But-
like 7 or 8 paintings, because he had to paint it in different canvas. And he bought other artists' canvases to use as a canvas and painted over many glorious artists.
So I want to give you my personal antidote to that. I wanted to make, and this kind of says something, I wanted to make a work about the pandemic, a large painting, and a big painting, like 8 or 7 feet big. And I wanted to use some canvas. Go to the store and buy it. No stores were open. And I found in my studio that I had a lot of remnant canvases around, stacked up, and I had a big piece of linen that someone had donated to me, a huge piece, but it wasn't quite right. So what did I do? I put them all together and I hand-stitched. So to make the size of the painting, which is a little bigger than this. And it took me, it was like, I could do a big thing in about a half hour. It wasn't a lot of work. I was surprised. First I was like, I don't have a sewing machine, but I've hand-stitched work before. And I kind of like fell back like, okay, this canvas, this painting is raw because I couldn't get it in gesso. I couldn't buy it. So the painting it's a large painting, it's on my website, it's a woman with a mask and some skulls, and it's, a little dab of paint here and there. But it's all the things, I couldn't go out and get all the supplies I really wanted to. And that word, when I look at it, it's like, well, that really represents kind of what you're saying is like, okay, I had to be innovative, and I had to go out and kind of figure out, I wanted to make this thing, what I got around to do. And it's the same thing with technology today, I think. With artists, it's like, okay, I cannot show in a venue anymore, at least for now. I mean, this is a unique situation because we're here in New York doing that now today. But how can I do that? And I'm in the position right now, I have a website, it's kind of old, I maintain it, but I've been thinking about I should have a store to sell my work. Because that's how people, I had before the pandemic, I had people come to my studio and buy my work. That was how I sold. I'm an independent artist, I'm not represented by a gallery. And now I'm in this situation, I think I need a store to sell the work. How do I do that?
So you're doing what the music world is doing.
Yeah.
Self-publishing.
I've always been but now I'm realizing because of the situation, I need to up my game, and I need to figure out how to do that. I don't have the answer yet. I have not done that. I've done a lot of research and stuff. But I do have Art Pot, who is here. Part of this is, we partner together. That is one way. But I'm also looking at it as an individual artist. How do I get myself out there? And what's the best way to do that? And how do I buy work? And how do I sell it? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that has a lot to do, with how do you as an artist figure out how to exist today in this environment. And you just have to, because everything is different for now and how I'm looking.
I just have to say that it wasn't necessarily so easy for artists before either, because you wanted gallery representation. The only thing that's like, there's newer or things is, obviously the website and Instagram and so if anything, yes, there's more access to artists finding with online or even, other digital platforms that are being developed now. So if anything, yes, it might give access, well, not just artists, but also people who might want to buy art. If you don't live in New York, you're not coming to the gallery shows, festivals, whatever. So I mean, that's one positive.
So is it-
Access
is
to
it-
the online.
Is it possible for everybody, is a question of goal and throwing at you, is it, in this moment of change, is it possible to sort of survive with this little help from our friends? Is it possible to, in a moment of decentralization, New York is no longer the center of our world as it used to be, as it was Paris, etc. So we're totally decentralized. We don't need Montana, Minneapolis, right?
Minneapolis is a great art scene, by the way. Just,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it's really good art scene.
At the Wild Center for Early American Art, etc. It's in a moment we have this freedom. Arthur Danto, one of the last moments I was with him in his, alive, told me, we live in a great moment. I said, so confusing, etc. He said, it's the first time we live without isms to depend upon. And guys, it should
One, I think that's a great way to sort of wrap this up, and that we don't live in a world of isms right now, and nobody can put their finger on anything, right?
So we have the freedom to act and do any program with technology
Yes.
and stuff.
We've been ignoring, is there anybody out here who'd like to ask a question or wants to bring something up? Before we wrap it up, thank you.
A quick comment. So basically, like on positive note, as you are actually all correct about things are changing, and basically old days, I'm talking 2019, people would wake up early morning in their apartment, go to work, and come back at night, pretty much to sleep in their place. So and at work, that's where they would see a lot of art basically hanging on the wall. And so now things change, so now people do work from home, and that's why they kind of missing probably this art from their life because they don't really have this exposure. So the idea is basically, corporations that the people go and work for would or could afford a painting that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, but obviously a person that wants to get the same exposure working from home cannot do the same thing. So what people do nowadays, you kind of start for art, being at home. So you basically, have to buy some cheaper art. So I guess there's going to be a lot of work for artists to produce different art that are affordable for people to put basically on their walls. Obviously, you can make it in digital format. You can buy like a Samsung picture TV and change art like basically subscription based. But also maybe it's all about like the kind of what media do you use or would you use for like real non-digital art, like for instance like Sana paintings, like that is 3D, you cannot easily reproduce it on a flat screen TV or print it out. Also if you talk about sculptures, something 3D, you cannot look on a computer or unless you have some VR. That's
You can
probably.
sell the program, actually, it's
Yeah.
pretty good in ways.
Anyway, I think that there's more for artists now, not less. It's probably, you won't be able to probably sell it because most people don't have that much money to pay for a beautiful piece of art. But if you kind of put the twist of basically put the art to the masses and yet make it original, somehow not the 3D printed one because obviously it's something that rubbish. I mean, not rubbish, it's still okay. But make it original, but yet affordable, then obviously it would make sense for you as a creator to pay your bills. But also the point, the old real estate is being vacant, I think the price is going to drop, so it's another positive thing.
Yes,
And the third thing I can say, well, I have a friend who is like basically runs a trading companies, an AI company that brought it public. They like basically with artificial intelligence to design new molecules, new drugs, and pharmaceuticals. He told me that AI does not exist, and he said, like, we're building the biggest AI company. Machine learning exists, and machine learning is something that works with data sets, and it doesn't have creativity, which just, as a programmer, tell it what needs to be done. That's why I mean, artificial intelligence is just that it's a fake word that makes everyone excited, but machine learning does exist, artificial intelligence it does not. I can go into details, but there is no competition for computers to design something.
So do you have a question?
Huh?
Question?
No, this is just again.
That's just 30 seconds. You pointed at something very interesting. I'm not close with this myself. You pointed at something very interesting for you and for you all. For me, a little less, but I'm really curious. The ban of people who can afford affordable art is decimated. The big dollars, the big guys in auction houses continue having a great time because they made 845 extra billions in the past 6.5 months. I just read last night with good sources. They can afford it, and the auction houses continue with that. The middle ones, the band that you say, ourselves and others, even if you make a good salary, having some thousand or not, you still can afford those big artists. And that is a real dilemma for the art world to contend with.
Yeah, I think.
Charlotte, why don't you wrap it up, and I think we're. No, you're good.
No, I think you pointed out something very interesting. Yeah, it's also about sharing this big cake. I mean, obviously some of them take a bigger piece. And I think that there's also opportunities here. We were preparing the outside art fair, for example, and they're doing this online platform and a physical event, and we are trying to find new locations, and we are sharing spaces, and people are collaborating in a way that they've never done before. It's not just signing an agreement, and people actually work together and have to find creative solutions with artificial intelligence or not, but obviously the computers and the technologies help, and I'm a very traditional person, so I'm surprised how helpful it is nowadays. And I also feel like most people talk about the crisis, but for me it's a new state of being. I don't think anything is going to get back to normal anytime soon, so we should just adapt to it and find creative solution and mostly reconnect with people, because this is all about communication, and the technology might help it or not, but I think this is the way to go now, trying to find creative solutions together.
Charlotte, thank you very much. I think it was a nice wrap up. Charlotte, Juan, Lily, Scotto, thank you very much. I appreciate it. But you know, I think talking about things like this and events like this, or friends, or dinner parties, which we aren't really doing anymore, you know, is I think the solution, right? And bringing people together, or you know, phone calls or Zoom calls. I mean, you know, Zoom is a new way of life now. My business, I spend all day on video calls. So I never did that in January or any time before. So thank you very much for everybody for coming.